Good afternoon and welcome to the Hampton Leftists Live. This is JB, also known as JB Font. I am here with Jason. We are talking about a couple of different subjects today, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to touch into medical marijuana, and we're also going to touch into the gaming community. Jason, how's it going today?
It's going all right.
Okay. Because of technical difficulties, Jason is unable to be physically on camera, but you can still hear him. And so this is wonderful. Even if you're trying to listen to a podcast or something like that, this is great for if you're in your car or whatever. So Jason, one of the things that you wanted to talk about, then you reached out, was about the community, about medical marijuana. And so I know that a lot of states right now are opening it up to more recreational. What is your thoughts on the recreational side of it opening up, and what was it exactly that you were trying to bring up as far as the decriminalization, of marijuana?
I mean, it's been a long battle to get to where we are now, and I think it's great that a lot of states are going that route. It's frustrating to see the way that it has come about, even though, like, a lot of people in those activist communities, we kind of saw it coming, that it would be, capitalized on, and would only ever really happen when it became profitable, right? I'm really glad to see that it's being decriminalized. Same with psychedelics too, like within places like Oregon. Like, I mean, frankly, I think that we shouldn't be criminalizing any substance. Like, prohibition always has negative consequences.
The whole prohibition thing. Actually, I was talking to, I think it was my second episode with Chris Richards, and we were talking about the history of the drug war, and we were speaking about how a lot of these drugs that people considered prolific, a lot of them were legal back then. Like, you can get, I think it was, you can get heroin over the counter. So
yeah. I mean, a prime example is Coca-Cola. Like, it's named because they literally used to have cocaine in it.
Yeah.
And cocaine in general was like used as like it was used for a lot of things. Like, it was, I can't remember. I'd have to look it up, but I'm fairly certain it used to be in like things for babies to like soothe your child. Like, cocaine. That's a wild one.
They actually, he brought that up, that there was a particular ad that was brought up of how to calm your kids down. Was it using cocaine? I forgot exactly.
I think it was like rubbing it on their gums.
Yes, it was like for teething babies. Yes.
Okay, I saw that same. And there was a time, I don't remember exactly when this ended, but there was a point where if you had a certain amount of land in the US, it was mandatory that you grow hemp.
Really? That is interesting. Yes. I did not know that.
I should have prepared some notes for this better. I'm just kind of going on memory here. But it used to be that if you had a certain amount of land, a certain percentage of it, and it wasn't like cannabis. It wasn't the same as like cultivating cannabis. It was more for like industrial usages. But one of the and this might not. This is just something that I remember growing up. Part of the criminalization of marijuana allegedly was because of its overlap with hemp and its industrial usages, and therefore being a competitor to the cotton industry.
I see. So it was kind of like a twofold purpose. So,
and obviously, I was just saying, obviously, of course, like the racist characterization, the name marijuana was used to like associate it with Mexico and Mexicans, and you know, the demonization of people of color, like in general. But
So it basically had a twofold purpose in the criminalization of it. So it was going against the cotton industry, the hemp industry was going against the cotton industry, and also the racial aspect of especially a lot of people from South America, particularly in Mexico, well, North America, and then Central America and Mexico.
Yeah, as a way to capitalize on like the xenophobic tendencies of people of the time. And then one of the other things that I wanted to talk about too was that the rapid militarization of like modern police forces also played a part in like the cannabis industry and the drug war. CAMP, have you heard of CAMP? The Campaign Against Marijuana Plantations?
No, I never heard of that one.
Oh boy. So this is something I have some personal experience with, growing up in an area that was prolific with like, you know, rural, like in the woods, marijuana growing operations. So camp was in the 90s. It was at the time, and maybe still to this day, it was the largest interagency law enforcement operation in the United States. So everyone from the FBI to local police agencies, the DEA, all coordinating to try to root out these like guerrilla cannabis farms. And one thing that I was taught at a very young age was to, and this is funny because it's also kind of like a weird right-wing trope, but more for like the ATF and other reasons, but the black helicopters. Watch out for the black helicopters, because where I grew up, they would fly like, what were they, Blackhawks. They would fly military helicopters over mountainous areas looking for these marijuana grows. And yeah, they would find them, they would come in, they would land in the middle of these areas with like full-on militarized SWAT teams. It's like one of the first instances of heavily militarized police in the US. Yeah, and they would just come and arrest everyone on if they could find people. Usually, you know, if you see a helicopter coming and landing on your grow site, everyone scatters into the woods. But if they caught people, they would arrest them. They would tear up all of their plants. They would throw them in a pile, and they would burn them. I'm fairly certain. Who's it? Barrington Levy, reggae singer, talks about they come to burn. He was talking about coca, but it applies like burning down the cane fields, burning down the marijuana fields. Like was a very prevalent thing in the 90s.
Wow.
So yeah, that was kind of, and this coincides with like, what was it, the first Bush, I guess that would have started under the Bush administration, but it was actually very not so much a federal thing, even though it did have like interagency support from federal law enforcement, but it was mostly in, because again, the campaign against marijuana plantations, I think, was specifically targeted at like California and like the Emerald Triangle and all that.
Well, I mean, this would make sense. I mean, I know that there had to have been a huge push by big pharma and pharmaceutical companies to also stamp down on this, because if not, then, you know, people realize a lot of the medicinal qualities within marijuana the effect, it literally has no side effects, and that, you know, you can't even overdose on it. And so for
yeah,
oh,
I would know.
I'm sure you are a connoisseur, and a lot of, you know, the listeners here are probably connoisseurs as well. But yeah, so the whole thing about them having like Black Hawks to come to basically marijuana fields to completely destroy it all. It's like, wait a minute, why are you doing that? Instead, it's like, why haven't you thought of using it as a tool to fund, you know, the government, especially state and local governments, instead of just destroying it?
I mean, it's, you know, this is like the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah,
this was the height of the drug war, so they really couldn't, because they had already spent all of this, you know, political capital in building up drug users, and all this is like this existential threat to society, and so it would go against, you know, everything that people were propagandized to believe. They couldn't really do that because there would have been some very like clear backlash against it, I think.
And let's remind the audience that one of the purposes of the drug war was to make it so that private prisons can be able to pick up people off the streets for doing these drugs and then put them in prison to work as basically slaves, because the 13th Amendment still allows slavery. And no, go ahead.
Yeah, and then not just that, but like I forget who it was who, like, on their deathbed admitted that it was also to break up radical groups like the Black Panthers and like the anti-war hippies.
Wasn't it Nixon? No, was it Nixon, or was it one of his cabinet members?
It was one of his cabinet members. I think it started during the Nixon administration, but it was a very like clear tool to target left-wing activists without specifically going after them for their political beliefs.
Yeah, because, you know, the left, you know, we're fairly, you know, libertarian as far as things like substances and things like that. So, you know, we're not, you know, if it can be regulated and you know, so that it won't harm people, but you can still do it, then, you know, I mean, for the most part. But yeah, I think that part of it was the left-wing control, because that was kind of a transition from the McCarthyite type the McCarthyite type era that we had just came out of.
Right.
And so they said, oh, well, these hippies and leftists, well, they smoke weed. Let's make weed illegal so we can arrest the hippies. And and they're like, well, that will take in, you know, a lot of Black people too. Well, yeah. And then also to fund our wars abroad, we're actually going to take cocaine, put it inside their neighborhoods, and then sell them the cocaine and use the sales from the cocaine to fund the wars, to extract resources in other poor brown and Black countries.
Yeah, the whole Iran-Contra.
The Iran-Contra.
I actually wrote an essay on the Iran-Contra in college before I dropped out. But that was like one of my highest graded papers was about.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've kind of always been on the trajectory to land somewhere far on the left politically, even though like definitely had phases that I wasn't proud of, and that gets into like falling in. Like I can elaborate on that when I talk about the radicalization of like the online gaming communities. But yeah, one of the saddest parts about the victories that we have gained with the legalization and decriminalization is, of course, the people who are still in prison for things that may be legal where they were imprisoned now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the people who lost, for a specific, I once had the FBI come to my door when I was a child. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember much about it, but I do know that a family friend basically had had that, like we said, the black helicopters. They found their plantation and they came and they arrested people, and some of them fled, and couple, a husband and wife, actually fled the country and they couldn't do it together because of, for obvious reasons. And one of them, I think, made it back into the States over a decade later, and the other killed himself on the run. Yeah. And so it's hard to think about, all of the fucking suffering that has been caused for just the purposes of combating some left-wing boogeyman for pure profits, for private prisons.
Ultimately, it's about oppression, power, and control.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
That's really what when you get right down to the nitty gritty of it, that's really what it's about. And the thing is that a lot of left-wing ideas, a lot of left-wing ideology stems on spreading out the power among all the people versus having it centralized in one section. And then you'll get a lot of people who talk about oppressive governments. The funny thing is that they don't realize that the United States also has an oppressive government, because our government is really ran by corporations and by oligarchs and by the rich and wealthy. So
it's the three military contractors in a trench coat.
Basically, yeah.
And that brings to mind, the current situation in Cuba, right? And the social media, huge AstroTurf campaign against Cuba and its repressive authoritarian governments. Cuba just voted on a new constitution in 2019. They voted on a new 90% of their population it's a country of 11 million people. 90% of their population voted in favor of their new constitution, and there's maybe a couple thousand people demonstrating against the government, which is and then you have people, fucking Joe Biden recently went out and put out that whole statement about, Cuba's repressive, and it's very obvious to anybody that is.
And that's the crazy part, because here in the United States, you don't hear these two words put together, Cuba and elections. You don't hear it put together. But the thing is that they held an election. 2019, they actually voted on a new constitution, and they had a 90% participation rate among voters in Cuba. How much is our participation rate here in the United States? What, 30% maybe among voters?
And when is the last time that we voted on our constitution?
We don't vote on our
constitution. We have never. No, it's never.
Do you know how much I want to? Do you know how much I want to ratify the 13th Amendment and then take that one part out that allows slavery? I just want to take that one little part out. Everything else is good, but that one little part I just want to take out. You know?
Now, I'm actually right now. I'm about halfway through Du Bois' Black Reconstruction, and that is just it's dense. It's like a 700-page book, but one thing that's very clear reading that is just how little has changed from even the immediate post-Civil War period. It's just at every step of the way, every bit of progress was recuperated into the same system of oppression that existed before.
Yeah.
That's where the private prisons figure in. It's like, well, we can't have slaves anymore, but we can have prisons. And if we throw enough people in prison, then we still have slaves.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a way to get around slavery. So, you know, I mean,
not even that, but just like one of the chapters that I was recently reading, it was like about how they basically immediately following like the emancipation and the end of the Civil War, a lot of states simply took the word, they rewrote their laws because they had to. They took the word slave and just replaced it with the word Negro. And that was it. It was the same laws. And it's not surprising, but just bleak.
Yeah, it's basically a tweak around the edge, which is something that we leftists are completely against because we've been doing tweaks around the edges for our entire lives and nothing has changed. You know, I'm happy that we have a lot more legalization here in the United States. But it still stinks that you have some who cling to this outdated and inaccurate notion that it is a gateway drug. You know, it's funny. I was listening to, I forgot the doctor's name. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad. But he was on Crystal Kyle and Friends, and he was actually speaking about drug legalization. And he said most people who actually do these quote unquote hard drugs are not addicted. They actually live functional lives. It's just a small number of them are addicted. And this whole notion that, you know, people are just all addicted to drugs and they just do them as soon as you get, you know, use them and you're hooked. Of course, should they be regulated and taxed and things like that? I agree. But at the same time, people should be able to make their own personal decisions, you know, body autonomy, things like that.
Absolutely.
And of course, I'm not going to let some, you know, 13, 14-year-old go into a CVS and buy, you know, some MDMA, you know, just to get trippy. No, it's like you have to be at least 21 years old, just like you do with alcohol, and you have to present it. And you know how when you're at the store and they have like electronics, but they're locked on the wall. Yeah. I would have it just like that. Just like, okay, so you can pick what you need, because some of these things are actually good for, like, for instance, psychedelics are actually good for like a brain reset, and they actually help with depression.
Yeah, no, it's really promising that places like Oregon, I think it was, that recently legalized psilocybin, and like that's, again, I'm for absolute decriminalization of it. Everything, pretty much. I think that even like even like meth is a common one. Well, what about meth? Well, meth only became a thing because it was, you know, like the bootleg version of speed. Like, I remember growing up that some of my friends' parents who were like in medical fields, like, they recreationally did amphetamines, like, oh yeah, oh god, yeah, doctors who have access to that shit, they're doing it.
Doctors were doing speed. Wow.
Oh, hell yeah. But again, it wasn't meth. They were not like smoking crystal meth. They were taking like lab created. Yeah. The overall point is that criminalization breeds these, you know, polluted versions of these things. People take anything they can get their hands on to make an equivalent. So with meth, it's like, you know, various over-the-counter drugs, or like fentanyl, for example. The other thing with it, prohibition does, is it increases the potency, because it's easier to smuggle, you know, a smaller amount of a more potent drug and then dilute it later. than it is to get, real pure heroin, for example. Like, I'm not in favor of people doing heroin. Please, people, do not do heroin. But like, opioids became more potent because of prohibition, because of things like fentanyl, because it's easier to smuggle smaller dosages of more potent drugs and then dilute them after the fact. But the problem there becomes you don't know, how much. It makes it a less reliable dosage because you don't know how much fentanyl is in your opioid. It's prohibition just makes all things more dangerous because it makes it harder to discern sources. It's the black market effect.
Yeah, and it's so much more dangerous because, I mean, imagine what some of the substances that they cut these things with just to make more of a profit.
Exactly. And then yes,
this is one of the reasons why I said, under regulation, like, for instance, let's say hypothetically drugs are completely legalized and recreational, and then they sell it at a CVS, and you want to get some cocaine, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would the government will have to regulate that 95 to 90, at least 98% of the contents of it have to be pure cocaine, no other additives whatsoever.
Yes.
Right. And in the street is you're probably getting maybe a 20% cocaine amount, and then the rest is probably, I don't know, it could be Similac baby food, or it could be
and that's the problem.
Baking
There's
soda.
No way to know. You can't know what it is.
Yeah. Just like, the same thing they regulate the alcohol industry. They can do the same thing with that too.
Unfortunately, the flip side of decriminalization and regulation is that it introduces like the capitalist elements into the mix. So I know a lot of growers who are either priced out of the market or had to sell their crops for like nothing that reasonably represents the amount of labor that they put into producing them. And it also incentivizes these, like, you have these tech bro fucking neoliberal entrepreneurs who are going in and doing these, large scale commercial growing operations now, and not paying their workers they're paying them a pittance. It's a big thing.
And can we jump on that really quick? A lot of people who are, like, for instance, a lot of people who are in prison right now, they're serving 20, 30 years for marijuana possession. And now you have some people who are in a state where marijuana is completely legalized, and they're able to get these businesses and grow them. And a lot of times they end up, the people who are in prison end up being Black, and we're stuck in prison, and then you have other people who are not Black and they're able to sell marijuana out of a dispensary and make huge amounts of money. Can you touch on the disparity in that as well?
I mean, I can give you a personal anecdote, and this was from a long time ago, not maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was working at a warehouse, and my friends and I, we were smoking a joint on our lunch break, and we were on our way back to work, and we got pulled over, and one of the cops, I think, used to like hang out with like younger people and even be at like house parties and shit. The one that happened to be searching the car, and I don't know this for certain, but like I was trying to hide my little stash container, and I know that I didn't like put it in an adequately discreet place. But after the search, they found our roach. They found a roach in the ashtray. And they did a big show of stamping it out on the sidewalk in front of us. And then they let us go.
Wow.
And after I got back in my friend's car, I was looking around and I reached under the seat, and I found my container, and it was clearly in a place that I hadn't put it. And the only thing I can think of was that one of those cops moved it and threw it under the seat. Because there was like an older guy who was like a real hard ass, like that was like really lecturing us, and then there was like a couple of younger guys. But like the only thing that I can think of is like that definitely would not have happened if I was not white.
Wow.
And it's a very and then where I worked at the time was a very conservative area of the city I live in. It's like it's almost a meme that it's like the cop district, like don't fucking fuck around there. But yeah, that stuck with me a lot. And then we made it back to our warehouse, and you know, none of us even really got in trouble, even though like some of our, like I think one of my managers actually saw us sitting on the curb getting searched by the cops, and we were fine. But again, all of us are white, so yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that sharing that story. Yeah, that it just goes to show that, you know, all I did, and I told the story before. I was at a convenience store on my way going to work, and as I'm standing there, and you know, I was still in the closet at the time, so nobody knew I was gay, and so. As I was standing there in the convenience store, this officer who kind of looked like Vin Diesel was standing there, and I'm not gonna lie, he was hot. He was like gorgeous. I was like,
Officer Vin Diesel rolls.
Yeah, right. And so I'm looking at him, like checking him out, you know. And then as I pay for my stuff, I leave. He calls me. He comes outside and calls me and says, "Hey, come over here." And then he was like, "You looking at me kind of funny over there. Is something wrong?" And I'm like, "No, officer, no." And he goes, and he's like, "So why were you looking at me like that?" I was like, I was still in the closet, so I didn't want to say that I was checking him out. So I was like, "Well, you look like somebody famous." He goes, "Oh, really? Who?" And I said, "Vin Diesel." He goes, "Oh yeah, I get that a lot. You have your ID on you?"
What the fuck?
And he ran my ID just from me looking at him.
God damn.
And so I'm juxtaposing this with your experience. You were literally smoking weed, and they found your marijuana, and they let you go.
We were driving under the
influence of weed. And all I did was just look at the police officer and check him out, and he ran my ID, and he found that he had nothing on me, and he let me go. But I was on my way to work. I was dressed up. I was in a button-up shirt and khakis and everything.
Oh yeah, I was not. We were working in a fucking warehouse with a bunch of like, you know, former felons and shit. Like it was a pretty wild environment there. So we were not dressed up.
Yeah. So it's just a crazy juxtaposition when you compare your experience to my experience. And mind you, I haven't touched marijuana until 3 years ago. And I've never touched it until 3 years ago. So I was 34. Yeah, I was 34 when I first touched marijuana.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was like 12.
A lot of us were, but you know, I was an outlier.
Yeah, that's cool. Good for you, honestly.
Yeah.
Smoking anything is bad for you.
Yeah. I tried vape though. That was actually that wasn't too bad. I still coughed a lot, but you know, it was cool. But yeah, man, this conversation is good. But you only said an hour. I wanted to get to the other topic that you also want to talk about as well.
It's my day off. I was gonna maybe hang out with a friend later, but until somebody calls me, I ain't got nothing going on today.
Okay, we can just finish this one topic and then we can move to the next one, right? That's fine. Okay, so as far as you know, the whole legalization issue is going. Virginia Was it Virginia? Yeah, I think Virginia just legalized. Virginia just
Wow,
legalized. Yes, it's the first state in the South to legalize recreational marijuana.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's now bleeding into the South, and now a lot of people are, there's a famous attorney here in Central Florida. His name is John Morgan. He's been trying to get marijuana legalized, at least for medicinal use. I think he's still fighting for the recreational use as well. I'm not exactly sure, but he's a huge attorney, and he's been trying to get it legalized here. And so I think it's going to be a matter of time because we have a lot of people from up north that are moving here. And so now that it's legal in places like New Jersey, I think it's just became legal in New York, then it's going to eventually become legal here in Florida because we have so many people from the Northeast coming to Florida.
Yeah, no, I mean that's great. And yeah, in spite of like the things that are, the issues still with things like people who were locked up when it was legal, like it's been a little bit like hopeful seeing these things back out, because like I grew up, I know some of the people who started the first medical legalization efforts in the US, I think. Have you heard of WHAM, the Women and Men's Alliance for Medical Marijuana?
No, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah, sometime look up WHAM, WAMM. They were like the first medical marijuana advocate. I think they had the first, I mean, it wasn't legal, but they had the first, tolerated, I guess you could say, like, marijuana co-op for medical purposes, and that was in California. And so, yes, seeing their efforts really like bear out and spread nationally has been, it's been great, in spite of all of the people who are still locked up, in spite of the fact that it isn't decriminalized everywhere. Like, it's good to see that their lifelong efforts at least bore some sort of fruit, even if it has been ultimately corrupted by capitalism. And
silver linings, right?
Yeah, we gotta acknowledge the good things that, and it's also a good representation of how, like, if you fight fucking hard enough, we can change things. It's not impossible. There is still hope.
Yeah, just like the Medicare for All march that we're doing on the 24th, this next coming Saturday, and a week from today, actually. You have to fight for something. And Frederick Douglass was the one who said that power concedes nothing without a demand. So, I mean, as far as, the justice for people who are in prison for, nonviolent drug offenses, this is one of the reasons why the whole defund the police movement has been, going on very strong, because we want to be able to also do criminal justice reform and releasing nonviolent drug offenders. Because I mean, the whole issue behind, drugs is a lot of times people just self-medicate because of the things that they're going through.
Yeah, that was another thing that I was going to mention, is that a lot of like the issues of addiction and like drug abuse is also because people are trying to escape from the, alienation that all of us are subject to under capitalism and, labor exploitation. Yeah, it's not so cut and dry as, well, this substance is, worse than this. It's like, no, these are things that people have available escape mechanism from an inherently oppressive society.
Yeah, definitely. I just and one of the things that will actually help with this will be a single payer healthcare system that also includes mental health care, because our minds and our bodies are not separate from each other. They're one, and they should be cared for equally, not in a separate fashion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just destigmatizing mental health issues
Yeah.
and drug abuse issues, and making
Yeah.
it so that people feel comfortable that they
Mhm.
is a criminal, as an insane person, or as
Yeah.
whatever. You like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
removing those stigmatizations will help
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
and having access, and not affordable access, but just access to
Access,
all of
true
those things.
access.
True access, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah. Just as easy as opening a cupboard and grabbing it. That's basically just as easy
Mm,
as we want it to be. Um, gosh, this is a great conversation.
thanks.
So okay, so you were talking about the gaming community. We're going to be switching gears here.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
gaming community. You said that there was kind of I guess, a reactionary, a reactionary undercurrent that's going on there. Tell me more about that.
More, I guess it would be a reactionary undercurrent now, but I
Hmm.
mean, as its origins, it was always kind of inherently. I mean, I'm a fucking early child of the internet. I grew up, like, I think I got my first PC back in like 1996, 97. I don't remember exactly. My
Wow.
friend's dad, yeah, my friend's dad worked for like a IT thing, and I ended up getting one of his like IBM computers. It's like a hand me down.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and for the time, it was like not a bad computer. And so I was online like back like the early days of data. Like I remember when like what was it, 28 kilobytes per second. That was fast internet.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Old school dial-up modems and all that.
I can hear it right now.
Yeah, yeah. But so and you can think of how like those things were fucking expensive then, and so early online gaming communities were just by material barriers, mostly occupied by you know economically comfortable middle class, mostly white, mostly men,
Yeah,
right?
because I
And
didn't
so
have a computer. We didn't get our first computer in our home until 2000, I think 2000, 2001. And even then it was rented.
damn, see, like the the idea of renting a computer has never entered into my mind. By 2001, I think I had built my own computer
Yeah.
for the first
Yeah,
time.
we were going to like errands or rent a center and just like getting a
Yeah,
computer from there. And then we didn't have regular internet. We got the discs from like America Online and stuff like
AOL,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. And
AOL.
then yeah, we would, do the dial-up internet through the discs and have that. But yeah, we were, lower middle class or lower class. So we just couldn't afford it. Like a laptop was a huge luxury for us to ever have. Like I
Oh yeah.
wouldn't, if you told me like 20 years later I would have a laptop like this, like no, I wouldn't be able to think about it. But
When I first got a computer, laptops were like a pipe dream. That was like
yeah,
fantasy.
yeah.
Um, but so like yeah, I was in those online spaces from a pretty early age, and
Hmm.
there was and at first it was very like juvenile, kind of like there's joking about there's no girls on the internet, this is like the boys only club, or like
Wow.
no one would believe, and there were girls on the internet, of course, but nobody, there was this disbelief if someone claimed, it's like, you're not really, you're pretending or whatever. Anyway, um so yeah, that was where the early online, especially online gaming stuff, kind of took hold. Was already, you know, uh, disproportionately of like white male demographic,
Got it.
and that held true. I think it's more or less getting more balanced nowadays, but even up until like the 2010s, like uh even up to like 2014, I think. I mean, it was still like a common assumption. And that leads into what I was talking about, or what I wanted to talk about World of Warcraft. So I was playing that for 6 years, probably. And I remember at the time, like, a very like overt strain of what I mostly thought of as, you know, like edgy humor, ironic racism, ironic misogyny, sex, and what have you. Other people recognized that as an opportunity. One of those people who I came to know after the fact was Steve Bannon.
What?
So you haven't heard about Steve Bannon, before he came to prominence in U.S. politics, ran a gold farming company in World of Warcraft.
Steve Bannon?
Steve motherfucking Bannon. Yep. So
Crusty Steve.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Fucking zombie decaying looking motherfucker.
Okay.
Seriously, it looks like a
this is gonna be good.
Corpse. So he actually ran a like gold farming selling operation where he would like pay people overseas in like China or wherever to farm gold, and using bots and all this stuff. It wasn't just them like actually going out and playing the game and grinding gold. It was just he ran a gold farming operation where they would sell gold to WoW players. And because of that connection, he recognized that, hey, like all these people who are like really into like MMOs and online games in general, mostly like lonely, disaffected, and like generally well off, you know, economically comfortable white kids, and that they were a ripe target for right-wing radicalization. And this was like even before Gamergate. Like you heard of Gamergate?
Can you remind our audience a little bit of
Gamergate? So that was the like where a bunch of online gamer chuds went after a female game developer because she had a relationship with a person that did game journalism, and it was all under the guise of like ethics in game journalism, but it was really just a cover to harass this woman and other female creators and just anybody that like the specific demographic that was being cultivated in that environment to like go after people who they thought like didn't belong, or it was like to keep politics out of my video games. Is like that's where it really kind of started. And you see that a lot now. Like every time there is like any like representation of any, you know, not typically you know every time there's a female protagonist, like these what was the recent one, the Last of Us 2, people were freaking out because there was like a masculine woman, and same with Horizon Zero Dawn. So a lot of that has roots back in that the early like attempts at radicalizing these people through online gaming. And I, playing these games, kind of recognize, like I was raised, you know, pretty well with regard to these things. Like my parents had gay friends, and like my, you know, I grew up in a pretty like diverse community, especially like since I lived in, you know, California and the West Coast, a pretty like radical culture around where I grew up. And so like this wasn't really much new to me. And when I saw how people that I interacted with online reacted to this stuff, it kind of gave me pause. But again, being someone who was never really affected by it, I just kind of passed it off as, again, you know, edgy humor or whatnot. But looking back on it, I realized that, yeah, there was a very clear, like, concerted effort to push that sort of, like, I mean, like, Holocaust jokes should never have been a thing, but they were popular amongst a certain demographic of gamers, and yeah. So it's like, it's really hard in hindsight to think about like what was organic and what was being pushed upon these people with a specific agenda.
Yeah.
And then learning that Steve Bannon actually used his connections to like the WoW community to push like the online neo-Nazi shit. And it coincides because this happened in 2014. 2015, I think, was when the big like Gamergate controversy occurred. And then you have that followed by the rise of, you know, like Donald Trump and 4chan kind of bleeding into the mainstream of internet politics. Like that was the thing. It's like a lot of this stuff was already there. It was just this like insular part of the internet. And instead of when, you know, smartphones, when the internet became brought to the masses, instead of that drowning out and diluting that, you know, little nugget of toxicity, it instead poisoned the wider internet community and kind of spread like a virus almost.
Yeah.
Like for what was it? Another book I read recently was Kathleen Bellew's "Bring the War Home." Have you heard of that?
No, I have not.
So it's about the militia movement and and paramilitary like white nationalist movements in the U.S. at large, going back to like post-Vietnam War era. And one of the things in that book that they talk about is how after so there was a string of like bank robberies and armored truck robberies carried out by these white nationalist militias who wanted to use that money to then like disperse it and fund their other, you know, groups around the country. And they got caught. They actually got charged for sedition. Yeah, if you look up, I think it was Louis Beam and some others were charged for sedition. It was one of the few usages of the Sedition Act. They got charged for sedition, and they had a bunch of raids on their compounds, and they got a lot of their weapons confiscated, and I mean like real military hardware shit. Like they had bazookas, like rocket launchers, and and heavy and like mounted heavy machine guns and shit got confiscated from these white nationalist militias back in the 90s, or maybe it was 80s.
Yeah.
It's fuzzy. Anyway, the point is they took all this shit from them. What they didn't take was their computers, because these people were aware of the power of the internet. Back in the 80s, these people were already on like Usenet boards and shit, and using that to discreetly disseminate their ideology. And so that's kind of like the origin of, you know, the 4chan, the ultimately the gaming radicalized, but like all of that online neo-Nazi shit really has roots in the fact that they never took the computers away from these fucking assholes.
Yeah, so it really all grew underneath the dark underbelly of the internet, and so this is how you got a lot of these new neo-Nazi white power movements and things like that. Yeah,
and that goes to why, like, anywhere you go on the internet, anytime anything, you know, contentious to those sorts of people gets mentioned, you have this swarm. That's like why there's this huge brigading and why they like have all these people trying to like dox left-wing people or minorities and trans people and all that. Trans people especially get targeted heavily by these fuckers.
Yeah. I've heard of like different like movements, like the incel movement, which for our viewers stands for involuntary celibate. And then you have MGTOW, which is men going their own way.
Yep. The broader MRA, men's rights activists.
Yeah, men's rights activists. Like, yeah. Come on.
Oh God.
Come on, dude.
Men are so oppressed.
Look, we have been oppressed for the last like 10,000 years. So yeah, by women. Oh my gosh. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Really? Oh gosh. It's like it's like, and you know what's funny? And my my co-host Meg is going to be proud of me for saying this, but I do agree with this statement. Men have also been a victim of our own patriarchy.
Oh,
we just have.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, the fact that we're targeting our trans community, why? You know, it's like, just because they're different from you, ultimately, you know, it just goes to show that, you know, you have some of these right-wing people who are born on the internet, like for instance, like the Ben Shapiros and the Jordan Petersons and these other ones. I can't think of their names because I'm really not interested in them. But yeah, so you know, they born on the internet and they use the online gaming community to spread this type of ideology, which is deeply unhealthy. You know?
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that pulled me out of like my weird, like edgy, almost like libertarian and like not the cool kind phase was when I remembered like the rise of the term SJW, social justice warrior.
Yeah. Oh, I hear that a lot.
Yeah. So that really gained steam around, again, 2014, 2015. This was like one of the things that I, in hindsight, feel like was definitely seeded by, you know, outside agitators. And I thought back then, I was like, wow, like, how are you using the term social justice warrior as a negative? Like, fighting for social justice is a good, like, an unequivocally good thing. Like, you're the fucking baddie if you're using that as an insult.
It's like, let's break down social justice. If you're not for social justice, then
if you're against social justice, or
if you're against social justice, if you're against treating women equally, if you're against treating minorities and LGBTQ plus people unequally, then guess what? You know, now I do understand how some people can take it a little too far and be overly sensitive on certain things, which I completely get. But the crux, the center, the nucleus of that was to make sure that we have justice within, you know, the social justice movement. Now, I don't usually get into a lot of the culture things. For me, it's more about the economics, and the economics will bleed into how we treat people in a cultural fashion. But I mean, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, so we can be more socially conscious with people while trying to do the same as getting equal, you know, things for people as far as their material conditions.
Yeah, no, that's the whole thing. Like, with, you know, people talk about like class reductionism or identity politics. Like, if you're on the extreme of either of those things, you're missing the point that you can't address either of those things without the other.
It's a balance. Yeah.
For example, if we manage to overthrow capitalism right fucking now, if I could snap my fingers and end capitalism.
Please, if you had the Infinity Gauntlet, I would be so happy if you snapped the fingers and did that.
But that wouldn't solve racism on its own, for example.
No. No.
And also conversely, I don't think you can try to address those issues of marginalized people being persecuted without also addressing the like you said, the economics. That you can't, again, they're so deeply intertwined that it is impossible to separate them.
Yeah.
That intersectionality, right? That's what the term actually means.
Yes. Yes.
We have to, you know, and same with imperialism. You can't be anti-imperialist without being anti-capitalist. You can't be anti-capitalist without being anti-imperialist. All of these things are intertwined.
Yeah. You can't have Batman without Bruce Wayne. You just can't. Yeah.
Obligatory Batman is a fascist. Come on, he's a billionaire that beats the shit out of poor people.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. That's a whole other tangent.
We'll save that for another time. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm ever back on here, we can talk about how Batman's a fascist.
Actually, you know what? You can actually go on. They would actually talk about that on the FHL show Nerdolitics.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that would be something to talk about.
Well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is Batman a fascist? That would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's private. The intersection of, you know, government and private owner, like corporations.
Private ownership,
he's a billionaire,
government,
who is
vigilante,
a billionaire who is all. Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot to unpack there, but
yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're getting off track.
Yeah.
But I mean, the larger point was that you were kind of being influenced by this in the gaming community.
It was honestly like, and then it really took me like trying to examine some of those things. I can't even think of like specific examples, but there was a point where I really started to like try to unpack what these like, because I was also like into like the edgy new atheist shit. And we'll watch a lot of those, you know, like evangelical getting owned videos. And I started to realize that like my YouTube algorithm was showing me some like very questionable things. And I think it was like looking for someone debunking Sam Harris. Sam Harris started to get like very like specifically Islamophobic. And it was through finding people critiquing and debunking those sorts of things that like I started to find like, you know, BreadTube, like I'm sure you've heard the term, right? Before that was even a thing, like I started to find some of those people, Sean and Three Arrows and H Bomber guy, and starting to seek out that sort of content to really like give like an obviously not like weird reactionary right-wing analysis of the same like subjects that were like starting to become popular in online discourse. And the further and further I delved into that content, I realized like, wow, the people that have, you know, the most honest and, in my opinion, correct analysis of these issues, turns out like a bunch of them are communists. And so that like pushed me into really like getting into explicitly like left politics, even though I was always kind of there, because like I talked about, my upbringing kind of always like sent me on that trajectory. I was sort of inoculated against becoming like an outright fascist. But I you know, I was guilty of making attack helicopter jokes and shit when I was a fucking teenager. Like I'm gonna admit that. Like I was not a great person for a while.
Yeah. I mean, we've all done things when we were young, and
but it was learning about like, oh hey, the people who have like a real grasp on the weird shit that's been happening, the shit that I like kind of noticed, like what the anti-SJW stuff when I was playing World of Warcraft, like things that I noticed were like clearly wrong, and the people that actually, you know, had an understanding of and like a thoughtful analysis of those issues, again, tended to be pretty far left, either, you know, anarchists, communists, what have you. And so yeah, from then on I started consuming more of that sort of content and started hearing references to, you know, Marx and Engels, Lenin and Mao and Kropotkin and all these people. And I thought, wow, this is like, you know, these people sound like they were very insightful. I should probably engage with some of the like real philosophical underpinnings of, you know, what brought these people to these conclusions. And yeah, now here I am, and like I think the last like 3 or 4 books that I've read have been like dense, you know, political philosophical tomes, like State and Revolution, and right now I'm reading Black Reconstruction. Next thing I'm going to read, I think, is Caliban and the Witch. Have you heard of that?
No, I never heard of that one. I just let you know, I'm still somewhat new to the left space. Like, for instance, I was a democratic socialist back in this time last year? Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? I just don't believe in capitalism anymore at all. And so I went straight socialist. So I see it as, you know, the focus on profits over people have done nothing but to cause pain, destruction, and death. Are humans perfect? And is any economic system perfect? Absolutely not. But there are much better ones that don't focus on the selfishness and the oppression of other people. And so this is one of the things that I've been looking at. And I've seen that, you know, there are systems where, you know, if you're a worker and if you have to say over what you know, do at work, then you're more likely, number one, to be a happier person at work. Number two, to get paid adequately for your work. And number three, the conditions and the atmosphere of your job tend to be better because you're now at a point where you have ownership part of it. And then you can also determine how things go by your vote. So basically, having democracy in the workplace, it's just like a duh thing, you know?
One of the first like real like academics, and not just people like taking down and dunking on like weirdo fucking Ben Shapiro and whatever, is Richard Wolff with Democracy at Work. Like,
Richard Wolff is wonderful, isn't he?
Yes, he's amazing.
Yeah, we actually, two of my FHL co-hosts, RJ and Jackie, and Sabrina, they all interviewed Dr. Richard Wolff as well.
Nice. I think I might have seen that because I've watched a lot of you guys' shows.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you guys are great. I forget there was one more thing that I was going to mention. It's escaping me. It was another.
You brought up Dr. Richard Wolff.
Yeah, no, it was something else that I read that I was thinking was real relevant. And I'm just blanking on it. It's early for me. I usually don't. What time is it? Yeah, this is like usually when I'm waking up.
I got you.
I'm trying to remember.
Well, it's okay. You'll get back to it, but
oh well. Anyway, sometime later day I'll be like, oh damn, that's what it was.
It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a little bit of light editing. I don't really edit these too much because you know, pretty much, you know, 99.9% of everything that we say is relevant to whatever, you know, the subject is. So, yeah. But yeah. you know, I just think that one of the things that kind of caught me off guard, but it didn't necessarily, it wasn't like a rude awakening. It was almost like a pleasant surprise, was I actually saw edgy lefties.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so let me explain. Whenever I thought of lefties back then, I thought of the flower power children, very calm, very gentle. Oh, we can't say this, we can't do that. And that's how the perception of lefties has always been. Until one day I came on YouTube, okay? And there once was a little man named JB. And he came across some of BreadTube. And like one of the first people who I came across was Kyle Kalinske. And he can be very edgy in what he says. But from a left perspective, and I'm just like, what? I'm like, hold on. You can have single payer healthcare and continue and have healthcare for everyone without having to worry about not being able to pay your medical bills. And then you're always covered and there's no copays, no deductibles, no premiums. Or then he brings up something about ending the wars and he's edgy with it. And for me, that was just like a culture where I was just like, whoa. So you can have a spine and be on the left. And
yeah,
that was crazy for me. It was just like, what?
Yeah. So after I got into a lot of those like leftist YouTube things, one night I was like, okay, I can recognize some of this bullshit that's being fed into my algorithm. And one night I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna like go down my recommendation list, hit like to use the like whatever, do not show me this thing. And I did it like to so many channels. And then I put on something else and I fell asleep with it on autoplay. And I woke up the next morning, and I shit you not, it was I had never encountered them before, but a clip from Chapo Trap House was starting to play on my YouTube. Yeah, it autoplayed me Chapo Trap House.
Wow.
And I'm laying in bed and I'm hearing these people like just ripping on Hillary Clinton and Obama, and I was like,
anytime you can rip on Hillary Clinton,
do I need
that's
to
a
like?
good thing.
Do I need to like? Yeah, well, no, but like I still is like learning here, and I'm listening to them, and I'm like, man, they sound like what they're saying is right, and it doesn't sound like the normal like reactionary right wing like demonization of Hillary Clinton or Obama or the Democrats or whatever. Like they're making sense and they're fucking funny. And so I didn't get up. I just laid there and I listened to it. And like after a time, like I, because of the language that they were using, I was starting to realize, I was like, oh, these people are like to the left of these people. And like, and there's a reason to actually despise these people that they're talking about. And yeah, I think that was like a tipping point for me where I was like, okay, like, yeah, it's both of these parties fucking suck, but not in the weird centrist libertarian way, like American libertarian way, where like, both parties suck, so we shouldn't do anything. It's like, no, both of these parties suck, so we should overthrow the government.
Yeah. So, and you come to a point where you have, I like to put it this way, you find edgy people who are compassionate. Like, like people will say, there's no fucking way that anybody should be sleeping out on the streets and out there. And you'll have people who are on the right or libertarian say, well, they earned their money. It's like, well, they earned their money. No, they didn't earn their money. They exploited their money and they should give the rest of it back. It's like, the fact that, for instance, you had two billionaires spend hundreds of millions of dollars just to go out into outer space, and you still have people sleeping out on the streets right now. Like, come on, come on.
I forget who it was. The quote about it is illegal to sleep on the sidewalk it is, the law treats everyone equal. It is illegal for both the rich and the poor to sleep on the sidewalk or to steal food. The law treats them equally, but like, of course, one person is being oppressed in this instance, the other person can just buy shit.
Yeah.
It's a bad paraphrasing of a good quote.
It's okay. We get the premise.
Yeah. Well, shit. I don't know if I have. I think I might have exhausted the things that I have thought about talking today.
It's quite all right. We're actually reaching the end, and I just wanted to. We actually went a little over time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that gives you some space to, edit out my like awkward pauses.
No. It's quite all right. One of the things that we wanted to do is we want to not just. I see a lot of people on BreadTube, and they will elevate like the same usual voices every single time. And it's like, no, there are many different perspectives out there. There are many different ideas and experiences out there. We need to bring those to the forefront. Even though they can't see you, they can hear you, and they can hear your experience, and they can hear your story, and they can hear the knowledge that you've picked up. And it may also be able to bring it in a way that they didn't think about it before. And so this is one of the reasons why we at Hampton Leftists, we like to bring in, people who that they don't know. And maybe, just maybe, you may not come up with your own channel or anything like that, but you are helping someone to be able to learn that they deserve better than what they're getting, and they deserve a life of dignity, compassion, and justice.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky that I actually I work a retail job where I'm given a lot of leeway to right. It's been
I work retail. Year. That's why I said that. I was
like, Fortunately, though, I get away with talking about a lot of the stuff that I've just talked to you about to anyone that comes up to my cash register, and I try to. Whenever it's relevant, and again, you get a lot of opportunities to talk about capitalism when people are complaining about the price of shit or whatever. I have a small platform of my own that I try to use responsibly, because that's another problem, is like it's so taboo for people to talk about politics with strangers, at least in America. Like it's seen as some weird, like, I don't know. So I just try to say, screw that. I'll tell people shit that they need to hear, even if they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten fired yet, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now I typically take this point to, ask people, where can they find you? Do you want people to find you? And if so, then where can they find you?
I mean, my Twitter account, so yeah, I don't really post much on there. I just try to boost and, to reply to people who I think are wrong, even though, like, I don't think that many people's minds are going to be changed by some anonymous guy on the internet, so I don't think I'm very important. But if I ever do have something important to promote, I guess I would definitely let you know, or anyone else, any other like larger people with larger followings, because I do think it's important. Like those platforms, like I said, some anonymous guy on the internet's not changing people's minds, but some anonymous guy on the internet changed my mind. So. I think it is important for
you have a voice,
like, all of these different creators to, like, for those audiences to overlap, right? Like, I see so much petty fucking drama on there. It's like, there are definitely people who need to be like constantly shit on, like Bosch, that guy just needs to go away forever. And people like that who already have a large following definitely need to be like denounced at every turn, but then there's like just so many like petty, like, oh, look at this bad take kind of thing, when it's like what people really need to be doing is developing that like radical education. Like,
Yeah.
I hate to fucking be one of those guys, but people need to read the fucking theories, like the shit that people wrote, even if it's like old shit from the 1800s, like Capital, like Marx's Capital is still really important and relevant. It sucks, and if you read it, you're going to be frustrated, but it's an important thing because, like, man, that dude like spent chapters on just making sure every single argument that he made was airtight. And there's a lot of math, and again, like it's frustrating to get through, but that's what I think is important, is that people focus on trying to digest and understand that those theories, like Marx, Lenin, Mao, all those people, and then to make that more accessible to the audiences that they have at their disposal. Because, you know, theory, like if you're just a theory nerd, you're just some armchair Marxist and you're not out there doing stuff, and that's fucking useless, right? But when people go out and try to do real praxis, if it's not backed up by those revolutionary theories, then they can almost do maybe more harm than good if you're just trying to affect change for change's sake without knowing, like, you know, it's a process. These people built this. It's why, I mean, you know, Castro, for example, was a Marxist Leninist, and like, so to look at successful revolutions of the past and then use the theory that brought them to where they were, but then also to take the mistakes that they may have made and build upon that and correct those mistakes ourselves, because, you know, we're in a new time and the material conditions are different from us. So yeah, bit of a ramble, but that's what I think is important. On that note, there's another great podcast that I've been listening to while I read Black Reconstruction, and it's their most recent series, is a podcast called Marx Madness.
Oh. I like that name.
No, it's great.
That's good.
They've done full readings of I think they started with Capital, Volume 1. That's kind of like the foundation of Marxism. And then they also did The State and Revolution. They read Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. They read what was it? Another Lenin, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And their current reading series is on Du Bois' Black Reconstruction. And it's been helpful for me because, like, they take the time to, they don't just read, it's not just an audiobook, like they'll stop and discuss like how every bit of these past works related to their contemporary conditions and also how they're still relevant today. And I think, like, for people who don't necessarily have a reading group, or, you know, worst case, you don't even have the book, like, it's a good way to engage with theory again if you don't have like already like a reading group of people to soundboard, you know, your own interpretations off.
Well, thank you so much. You've also put some books into the book club. So we are Marx Madness. I want to look into that, but so I just want to, you know, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And look, just don't be a stranger. And I would actually like to have a few more discussions with you, ranging on topics that were still in this arena and also other topics, you know, even some of the news of the day, if you can come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be down for that for sure.
All right, great.
I like to, you know, like, it's pointless for any of us to, like, you know, for me specifically, I feel like it's pointless for me to have read and done all of this self-education if I don't do something with it, if I don't try to use that to give a meaningful critique to other people, to provide, again, like I said, we have to absorb those past works, and then we have to make our own synthesis of that with our current material conditions. That's like how we develop the leftist ideology going forward. Like I don't like to like call myself anything like an anarchist or a Marxist Leninist or a Maoist, because I think that all of those schools of thought have something useful, and that people should engage with all of those various tendencies and use that knowledge to like where it's applicable.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Jason, everybody, thank you so much for coming. And and make sure to stay tuned to FHL this Thursday. We're going to have our usual roundtable at 4 p.m. However, at 7 p.m. Eastern time this Thursday, we're also going to have a disability roundtable to help kick us off for the Medicare for All March that's coming up on the 24th. So we're going to be having a roundtable that, and I want you guys to stay tuned for that. Jason, thank you so much. And yeah.
All right.
See you guys in the next time.
All right.